The mountains rose like jagged teeth against the dimming sky, their rocky faces streaked with red from the setting sun. The air was thin and dry, carrying the smell of dust, sweat, and smoke. 12 U.S. Marines huddled in the remnants of a bombed-out village in eastern Afghanistan, a place that had once been alive with life, but now existed only as rubble, shadows, and danger. Every wall they crouched behind was cracked, every doorway a potential trap, every alley a death sentence. The enemy had them cornered. The tension wasn't just in the air, it was in their bones. Sergeant David Keller's eyes scanned the horizon, his jaw tight, the muscles in his neck taut with stress. He was tall, broad, and built for this life, but even he felt the pull of exhaustion creeping in. The gunfire that had started hours earlier hadn't let up. Instead, it had escalated. Tracer rounds zipped past them, illuminating their temporary shelters in sharp bursts of orange and green, painting the Marines' faces in flickering light. Each muzzle flash carried with it the reminder. One wrong move, and death would come without warning. Positions! Keller barked, his voice slicing through the chaos. His men obeyed instantly, the kind of reflexive discipline forged over years of training. Corporal Ruiz dropped low behind a stone wall, keeping his M4 at the ready. He chewed on the inside of his cheek, a habit he didn't notice until the blood mingled with dust. Private First Class Thompson's knees shook as he crouched in the corner of a collapsed building. He had joined the Marines just a year ago, and now he was staring down a night that might never end. Every second felt like an eternity, every heartbeat like a countdown. The radio crackled, but the static was relentless. "Command, this is Echo Squad," Keller shouted into the handset, the strain in his voice unmistakable. "Do you copy?" "Over." The only reply was a hiss of static, broken by the faintest whisper of a voice that might have been real. "Keller?" The sound disappeared before he could respond. "Nothing," he muttered, throwing the radio onto the ground in frustration. The mountains swallowed any hope of reinforcements tonight. The Marines were on their own. In the village, the sound of boots and muffled voices echoed as the enemy shifted positions. Keller peered through his night vision goggles, the green tint giving the world an otherworldly, unreal quality. He could make out several figures moving along the ridge above the village, silhouetted against the faint moonlight. They were fast, silent, and coordinated professionals who had done this before. Keller counted them quickly, estimating their numbers. 30, maybe 40. Far more than his 12. "Keep your heads down," he whispered, almost to himself. He knew the enemy had sniper positions somewhere in the rubble above. One shot, one careless glance, and someone would be gone. He motioned to Ruiz. "Check the west alley. Thompson, cover the north street. Everyone else, stay tight and keep low." Every movement had to be precise. Every Marine knew it. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying with it the faint smell of burning wood and gunpowder. Keller caught a glimpse of movement to his left, a shadow slipping between broken walls. He froze, heart hammering, finger on the trigger. "Contact!" he shouted. Thompson's first real firefight, and he fired, shaking with adrenaline as his bullets found nothing. The shadows moved again, faster now, more confident. The enemy was testing them, probing their defenses, measuring fear. Keller's mind raced. They had no reinforcements, no extraction plan, and dwindling ammunition. Every choice mattered. Every heartbeat could be the last. Night had fully fallen, and the mountains were cloaked in darkness. The only light came from muzzle flashes and the pale glow of the moon, reflecting off the rubble-strewn streets. The Marines' faces were smeared with dust, sweat, and grime, each line carved by fatigue and fear. Ruiz kept his eyes sharp, scanning constantly for movement. He whispered to Thompson, who was trembling but nodding in understanding, "Stay focused. Don't let them see you flinch. Thompson's lips were dry, jaw tight. He had trained for combat simulations, but nothing could prepare him for being trapped in a valley with enemies everywhere. Keller crouched behind a half-destroyed wall, scanning the ridge. He thought of the reports he had filed earlier that week, the patrols he had led, the missions that had gone perfectly on paper. This wasn't on paper. This was real. And the reality was that they were alone, cornered and outnumbered. He swallowed hard, trying to steady his racing heart. Every Marine in that village had a family, a life waiting somewhere far away, but here it didn't matter. Survival was all that mattered. Suddenly, a mortar round exploded a few meters from their position, throwing dirt and debris into the air. The Marines ducked instinctively. Keller felt a sharp sting on his arm as grit and dust mixed with blood. He ignored it, signaling to Ruiz to return fire. Suppressing fire now. Don't let them think we're weak. He fired carefully, every shot calculated, but bullets seemed almost useless against the overwhelming numbers and superior positioning of the enemy. Yet they fought, because that was all they could do. Fight or die. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. Time lost meaning as the battle stretched on. The crackling of gunfire, the booming of mortar, the cries of the wounded all merged into a relentless symphony of chaos. Keller felt exhaustion claw at him, muscles trembling from the constant tension. Yet he remained vigilant. Leaders had to endure. Leaders had to inspire. He glanced at his men, Ruiz, stoic and precise. Thompson, pale and shaking, but alive. PFC Daniels, muttering prayers under his breath. They were tired, terrified, but they had each other. That mattered. Keller thought about the geography of their trap. The village was enclosed on 3 sides by cliffs and ridges. The 4th led into a narrow ravine, which was heavily mined or ambushed. It was the only possible escape. And yet, even escape seemed impossible. The enemy had numbers, elevation, and surprise on their side. Keller knew it. Still, giving up was never an option. Marines never gave up. Not in the mountains, not in valleys, not anywhere. He crouched low behind a shattered doorway, his rifle resting across his knees, eyes scanning the darkened street. He noticed small details, a shift in shadow, a flash of movement, the faintest hint of sound from above. He realized he had been watching for hours, yet the enemy hadn't noticed him yet. They were confident, overconfident, and that, Keller knew, was the opening they needed. A sudden flare streaked across the sky, illuminating the village for an instant. The enemy froze, exposed, and Keller's mind raced. Could it be artillery? Drones? Or something else entirely? He didn't have time to think. "Stay ready," he muttered, voice low but commanding. Eyes open. Every shadow is an enemy until proven otherwise. He felt a prickling at the back of his neck instinct, honed through years of combat. Something was coming. Something big. Something unexpected. The Marines continued to move cautiously, staying low and silent, advancing inch by inch toward any cover that offered protection. Keller's senses were heightened. He could hear the smallest shift of rocks, the faintest whisper of movement. Every second stretched into an eternity. He felt fear, not for himself, but for his men. Their lives were fragile, like sparks against the wind, and any mistake could snuff them out instantly. He gritted his teeth and kept moving, forcing his body to obey despite fatigue and terror. And then, somewhere high above the ridges, Keller thought he heard it, a faint whine, almost imperceptible over gunfire and wind. It was strange, not mechanical, not familiar. He squinted, straining to see. Could it be? No, impossible. Not yet. But instinct told him something was coming from the sky. Something or someone It might change everything. He shook his head and returned his focus to the enemy below. They were still alive, but barely. And the night was far from over. The Marines huddled close as the wind howled through the shattered village. Dust whipped across their faces, grit filling their mouths and noses. Thompson's hands shook as he loaded another round. Ruiz gave him a hard, silent look, a reminder. No mistakes. Keller whispered encouragements, calm but firm, trying to keep the men focused, alive and alert. Every second was precious. Every heartbeat a reminder that they were trapped, surrounded, and on the edge of annihilation. And in the darkness above, hidden from sight, something was descending. The wind shifted again, colder now, carrying the scent of scorched earth and gunpowder that lingered in the valley like a thick fog. Sergeant Keller pressed himself against a crumbling wall, his eyes scanning the ridge above the village. Shadows moved along the jagged cliffs, long and deliberate. The enemy was reorganizing, preparing to crush them. Keller could feel the weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders like a boulder. 12 Marines, trapped, outnumbered, outgunned. Every heartbeat felt amplified in the cold night air, each one reminding him of the fragility of life and the responsibility he bore. Corporal Ruiz crouched beside him, his face streaked with dirt and sweat, scanning the ridge with a focused intensity. "Sarge, they're positioning snipers," he whispered, nodding toward a ridge that rose like a jagged spine over the village. Keller followed his gaze, catching the glint of something reflective in the moonlight. "I see them," he muttered. "Every movement we make, they know. We're sitting ducks." He swallowed hard, tension tightening his throat. The mortar strike from before had forced the enemy to pause for a moment, but now they were back, methodical, deadly, and patient. Private Thompson huddled low behind a toppled wall, trying to steady his trembling hands. He had fired rounds, hit nothing, and still survived. He was shaking, every muscle tense, heart hammering. "I can't miss again," he whispered, almost to himself. Ruiz placed a hand on his shoulder, firm but comforting. "You're fine. Breathe. Focus. Watch the shadows." Thompson nodded, swallowing a lump in his throat. He had trained for this in simulations, but simulations didn't simulate the smell of blood, the scream of a friend, or the sudden flash of a tracer round carving its path toward you. The valley seemed alive with sound, the sharp report of gunfire, the distant crack of mortar explosions, the rustle of gravel under enemy boots. Keller could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears, feel the sweat tracing rivulets down his spine, hear every shallow intake of breath from the men around him. It was suffocating, oppressive, relentless. He clenched his jaw and scanned the ridges, searching for any advantage. There was none except, perhaps, the sky. A faint whine cut through the night, almost drowned by the chaos below. Keller froze, straining his ears. The sound was mechanical, yet unlike any aircraft he had heard before. Not a drone, not a helicopter. Something higher, something faster. "Do you hear that?" he asked, voice low, almost drowned by gunfire. Ruiz cocked his head, listening intently. The sound grew louder, higher-pitched, almost imperceptible over the mortar thuds. Then, faintly, Keller saw it a blinking light far above the ridgeline, weaving slightly as if carried by the wind. The Marines held their positions, eyes wide, rifles ready. Even Thompson straightened, though his hands shook. "What is that?" he whispered. Keller shook his head. "Not sure. Keep low. Don't move too much." The light blinked again, brighter this time, reflecting off the jagged rocks. The enemy, however, seemed oblivious. They were focused entirely on the village below, confident that their trap was unbreakable. Keller's gut told him that confidence could be broken, and perhaps the light was the first sign. Then it happened. A streak of silver tore through the sky, descending with unnatural speed. Keller's stomach dropped. "Everyone down," he shouted. The Marines flung themselves behind cover as a shockwave of wind hit the village, kicking up dust, gravel, and debris. Tracers streaked past them from enemy positions, but they didn't dare fire. Their attention was caught by the falling figure, a human shape, descending like a phantom from the clouds. A parachute unfurled, glowing faintly in the moonlight, carrying a single person directly toward the valley. "Is that a pilot?" Ruiz gasped. Keller's eyes narrowed. He didn't know, but instinct told him it was. Whoever it was, they weren't coming in to escape. They were coming in to fight. The enemy's gunfire faltered, uncertain. Their focus was split. Keller knew this was the opening they had been praying for, though he couldn't see the full picture yet. The falling figure hit the ground hard beyond the enemy line, rolling into cover as if the impact were nothing. Keller leapt from behind his wall, signaling the men forward. "Move! Cover fire!" Now, the Marines obeyed instantly, advancing a few meters at a time, firing in calculated bursts. The enemy scrambled to react, but the sudden attack from an unknown direction threw them into chaos. Explosions erupted as the falling figure moved quickly, almost preternaturally, neutralizing enemy positions with precision. Keller could only watch in disbelief, his pulse racing faster than ever. From his vantage point, Keller could see the stranger helmet cracked, uniform scorched, carrying only a sidearm and a fierce determination that radiated through the night. The pilot moved like a shadow, striking with ruthless efficiency. One enemy, then another, fell as he advanced, taking calculated risks no ordinary soldier would dare. "Holy hell," whispered Ruiz. "Who is that?" Keller shook his head, heart hammering. "I don't know. But he's on our side." The enemy began to falter. The sniper on the east ridge was taken out first, and another squad forced to retreat from the western alley. Keller seized the opportunity. "Push forward. Take the buildings. Flank right," he ordered. The Marines moved like a storm, bullets streaking past them, hearts pounding with renewed hope. The pilot, now clearly visible, moved toward the Marines' line, rolling behind rubble to regroup. Keller finally had a chance to study him. A man in a battle-worn flight suit, helmet visor cracked, soot covering his face. His movements were precise, methodical, deadly. The pilot raised a hand briefly, signaling Keller and his squad. Keller nodded once, silently thanking the sky for sending help when it seemed all hope was gone. The Marines pressed forward with renewed energy, flanking enemy positions and rescuing wounded comrades as the pilot's unseen presence wreaked havoc on their attackers. "Sergeant, I've never seen anything like this," Ruiz said, firing at a retreating enemy fighter. "Who is he?" Keller didn't answer immediately. His mind raced. This man had changed the tide of the battle already, moving with an almost supernatural speed and awareness. He could have been any one of theirs, missing in action. A ghost sent from the heavens. Either way, Keller knew one thing. Survival now depended on him, and on whatever luck or skill had brought this mysterious figure down from the sky. The Marines moved cautiously but decisively, covering each other as they advanced through the shattered village. Thompson, still pale and shaking, watched the pilot in awe as he cleared a house of 2 insurgents with a single precise shot. The young Marine felt courage surging inside him, the fear replaced, if only slightly, by admiration. Keller noticed the change. His men were not just fighting, they were inspired. The pilot's audacity, his unexpected arrival, had shifted the balance. As the first hints of dawn began to creep over the horizon, the pilot finally approached Keller's position. He was limping slightly, his uniform scorched, sidearms smoking from recent use, yet alive and determined. Keller crouched low, rifle trained, unsure whether to trust him fully until he had identification. The pilot removed his oxygen mask, revealing eyes that were burned with exhaustion, but alive with fire. "Lieutenant Eric Shaw," he said simply, catching his breath. "Air Force. Shot down 2 days ago. I wasn't done fighting." Keller stared in disbelief. Shaw had been declared missing, presumed dead. Yet here he was falling from the sky like a phantom and turning the tide of an impossible battle. Ruiz whistled softly, shaking his head. "Guess miracles do happen." Keller gave Shaw a nod, an unspoken acknowledgement. "You're with us now. Let's finish this." Shaw simply grinned, reloading, and disappeared back into the shadows of the enemy lines, ready to fight. The Marines, inspired by his arrival, moved with renewed precision. They flanked, fired, and advanced, exploiting every crack in the enemy's defenses. The valley, once a trap, was becoming a battlefield of opportunity. The enemy's confidence faltered as explosions ripped through their ranks. Keller could hardly believe it, but he didn't have time to dwell. He had men to protect, and a pilot who had literally fallen from the sky to lead them. In that moment, hope returned to the valley. The impossible no longer felt impossible. And high above the cliffs, the sky had sent a savior. The valley trembled with the echoes of explosions and gunfire. Smoke curled like dark fingers around shattered buildings and twisted steel. Sergeant Keller crouched behind a wall, sweat running down his temples, heart hammering, eyes scanning the shadows. Somewhere beyond the ridge, Lieutenant Eric Shaw moved with deadly precision, invisible but devastating. Each muffled shot from his sidearm, each figure that fell under his control, shifted the battlefield subtly, imperceptibly, yet irrevocably. Keller had fought in countless battles, but he had never witnessed anything like this. Shaw was a ghost sent from the sky, striking with lethal intent and disappearing before the enemy could react. Corporal Ruiz shifted his position to provide covering fire as Thompson advanced cautiously along the debris-littered street. "Keep your heads down," Keller shouted over the roar of combat. "Stay sharp. Don't get greedy." The Marines moved like a shadow of soldiers, blending into the rubble, using every available piece of cover. Their eyes, wide and alert, darted constantly, reading every flicker of movement, every whisper of sound. Thompson's hands trembled, yet he forced himself to reload and aim steadily. Shaw's silent intervention had given them a fighting chance, and they knew it. They couldn't squander this miracle. Not now. The enemy, previously confident in their overwhelming numbers, began to falter. Confusion spread across the ridges and alleyways like wildfire. One squad tried to flank Keller's position, only to be neutralized by Shaw's unseen fire from above. Keller witnessed it with disbelief, the way Shaw timed every shot, every move, exploiting every weakness in their formation. "That man," Ruiz muttered under his breath. "He's unreal." Keller shook his head. "Focus on the enemy in front of us," he said. His voice was firm, steady, even as awe threatened to distract him. The mission was still survival. That was the only certainty. Shaw moved like a shadow through the enemy lines. Every step was calculated, every burst of gunfire precise. He ducked behind a crumbled wall, then emerged to take down a sniper, aiming for Thompson. The young Marine froze for a moment, astonished, before continuing forward. Shaw's impact on the battlefield was immediate. He wasn't just surviving. He was dominating. Every enemy who had expected an easy victory was now caught in panic and chaos. Keller could see them hesitate, regroup, retreat, and fall in waves of confusion. The tide of the battle was turning before his very eyes. Keller issued commands rapidly, moving his squad forward. "Push to the central alley. Watch rooftops. Thompson, cover left. Ruiz, cover right. His voice was calm and authoritative, cutting through the chaos. The Marines responded with trained precision, suppressing enemy positions, clearing buildings, and advancing inch by inch. Dust, smoke, and debris clouded their vision, but Keller's focus was unwavering. He could see the fear spreading in the enemy's eyes, their confidence shattered by the ghostly presence of the pilot and the relentless push of the Marines. Hope, long buried under fear, was blossoming again. The faint sound of Shaw's sidearm rang out periodically, a punctuation in the valley's symphony of chaos. Keller glanced upward at the ridge, where the pilot moved with uncanny skill. Each movement was efficient, each action devastating. Shaw's presence was more than tactical, it was psychological. The enemy faltered not just from bullets, but from the realization that someone had entered the battlefield who could not be stopped, someone untouchable, unpredictable. Keller's Marines felt it too. The courage that had been dwindling surged back in their veins. They moved with new energy, firing and advancing, synchronized with the unseen guardian above. The valley floor shook again as mortar fire rained down from the enemy's secondary positions. Keller ducked instinctively, yelling, "Down! Cover!" Thompson pressed himself against a wall, heart pounding, and fired at a target he could barely see. Ruiz's rifle flashed repeatedly, each shot taking out insurgents trying to regain control. Shaw's movements above continued to sow chaos, striking key enemy positions with lethal efficiency. The combination of ground tactics and airborne interference was turning the tide. The enemy's initial confidence was replaced by desperation, disorganization, and terror. Keller's Marines were alive, and they were reclaiming control. Shaw finally reappeared near Keller's position, emerging from the shadows to neutralize two insurgents hiding behind a partially destroyed building. He moved with a fluid grace, his rifle disciplined, his eyes sharp. Keller lowered his weapon, slightly in recognition. "Lieutenant Shaw," he said, voice tense with urgency and awe. "We need to consolidate. Push through the center. Secure the alley." Shaw nodded once, his face smeared with dirt and soot, exhaustion evident but determination unbroken. "Let's clear them out," he replied. He was no longer just a pilot. He was an equal, a force multiplier, a storm in human form. The Marines advanced with renewed vigor. Each building they cleared, each corner they secured, shifted the battle incrementally in their favor. Thompson, adrenaline coursing through him, found confidence in the chaos, firing with precision he didn't know he had. Ruiz moved like a shadow, covering every angle, protecting his squadmates. Keller led them with steady authority, eyes scanning constantly, mind calculating every risk, every advantage. The enemy was faltering, retreating from positions they had held all night, confused and fearful of the unseen force striking from above. In one decisive moment, Keller spotted an enemy machine gun nest covering the central alley. He knew that if it remained active, his squad would be pinned indefinitely. "Shaw, take the nest," he shouted, aware that only someone with Shaw's skill could accomplish it. The pilot vanished into the rubble, beyond the enemy lines, moving like a shadow, silent and deadly. Seconds later, the machine gun nest went silent, and the Marines surged forward, breathing easier, their morale skyrocketing. Hope, fragile yet fierce, had returned to the battlefield. The valley was still a dangerous place, but now it was a place of opportunity. Keller's squad moved together, synchronized, clearing buildings systematically, ensuring the wounded were protected, and minimizing exposure to enemy fire. Thompson's confidence grew with every successful move. Ruiz's tactical skill shone as he covered every angle. Keller's leadership anchored the squad. Shaw continued to operate as both weapon and phantom, striking where needed, guiding their advance from beyond visible sight. Each action was precise, deliberate, and lethal. The combination of skill, courage, and unexpected help was shifting the balance in their favor. By the time the first hints of dawn appeared, the Marines had regained a foothold in the village. The smoke hung heavy in the valley, curling over rubble and fire. Keller scanned the horizon, watching as the enemy retreated, disoriented and broken. He allowed himself a brief breath, feeling the tension ease slightly. "We're not out of the woods," he muttered, but for the first time that night, he dared to hope. His men, battered, dirty, exhausted, yet alive, shared a silent acknowledgement of survival, their bond strengthened by the crucible of combat. Shaw finally emerged fully from the shadows, approaching Keller's position. He was battered, uniform torn, helmet cracked, and yet alive and alert. "You're amazing," Ruiz whispered, awestruck. Keller simply nodded, understanding fully that Shaw had changed the outcome of the battle before they had even realized it. The lieutenant's presence was more than intervention. It was a reminder of what courage, skill, and determination could achieve, even against impossible odds. The Marines regrouped, eyes scanning the valley, hearts pounding, ready for the next phase of survival and counterattack. Keller took a deep breath, surveying his squad. "We've turned the tide, but stay sharp," he warned. Every second could bring reinforcements for the enemy. Every mistake could be fatal. Thompson wiped grime from his eyes, taking in the devastation and destruction around him. Ruiz adjusted his gear, readying for the next move. And Keller looked at Shaw, silently thanking him, not with words, but with acknowledgement and trust. In the heart of a valley that had almost claimed them, they had found hope. The battle was far from over, but now it was theirs to fight on their terms. The valley was quiet now, but only for a heartbeat. Smoke still curled in jagged ribbons from collapsed buildings, and the acrid smell of gunpowder clung to every surface. Sergeant Keller crouched behind the shattered remains of what had once been a marketplace, eyes scanning the ridges and alleyways for movement. Shadows shifted constantly in the dawn light, and every corner could conceal an enemy sniper waiting for the perfect shot. His men were battered but alive, their rifles at the ready, muscles coiled, hearts racing. The first taste of hope had arrived with Shaw, but it was fragile and fleeting. The battle was far from over. Corporal Ruiz peered through his scope, tracing the movement of the last enemy positions. "Sarge, they're regrouping near the central alley," he said quietly, tension in his voice. Keller nodded. "Then that's where we'll hit next. Thompson, cover the east flank. Daniels, move with me to the left. Ruiz, watch the rooftops. Keep eyes open for anything snipers, booby traps, anything." The men moved like shadows, silent but deadly, weaving between debris, bodies, and rubble, every step a calculated risk. Their movements were no longer just about survival. They were about reclaiming control. High above, Shaw was already advancing along a ridge, unseen but devastating. Each movement he made was precise, each shot deliberate. A sniper attempting to target Keller's position suddenly fell silent as Shaw neutralized him with a single, calculated shot. Keller's heart skipped a beat as he watched the unseen force turn the tide of the battlefield. He whispered to Ruiz, He's everywhere at once." Ruiz didn't reply, only giving a tense nod, eyes wide as they watched the chaos unfold. The Marines moved with renewed energy, emboldened by the phantom striking from above. Keller signaled his men forward. They advanced slowly, clearing buildings one by one, checking for enemy hiding spots, ensuring the wounded were shielded. Thompson's hands no longer trembled. Adrenaline coursed through his veins, sharpening his senses. Every explosion, every gunshot, every falling body reinforced a single truth. They were no longer cornered. They were fighting back, and the valley had shifted from a death trap into a battlefield of opportunity. Keller felt a strange mix of awe and relief as he realized it. Against impossible odds, they were winning. Shaw's movements became even more audacious. He leaped from one crumbled wall to another, taking out enemy positions that had been pinning the Marines. Each action was lightning fast, almost too fast to follow. The enemy, confused and terrified, stumbled in disarray, their strategy collapsing under the weight of his assault. Keller knew he could not ignore Shaw's intervention. It was no longer assistance, it was tactical supremacy. He gestured to his men, coordinating a push that mirrored the precision of the pilot above. Every step, every move was synchronized with the unseen attacks, and the enemy had no answers. The central alley, a narrow corridor of rubble and wrecked vehicles, became the focus of Keller's attention. From this vantage, the Marines could cut off the retreating enemy and reclaim critical territory. Keller whispered, "This is it. Thompson, Ruiz, cover our advance. Daniels, with me. Push through, secure the alley, and we hold it." Thompson swallowed, then nodded, jaw tight with determination. Ruiz's eyes scanned rooftops, rifles raised. The men moved like a storm, bullets flying in calculated bursts, clearing pockets of resistance while keeping low. Every step forward was measured, every shot deliberate. Shaw's figure appeared momentarily along the ridge above, silhouetted against the early light, before vanishing again behind rubble. His phantom-like movements caused enemy squads to hesitate, each unsure of where the next strike would come from. Keller's men took advantage of the confusion, advancing steadily. The enemy's morale, once unshakable, was cracking. Explosions erupted as Shaw neutralized a machine gun nest that had been holding back Keller's squad. Keller pressed the assault. "Move, clear the alley. Don't stop for anything." His voice rang with authority, cutting through fear. As they entered the alley, Thompson took the lead, scanning each corner, each doorway, rifle ready. His heart pounded in his chest, but he felt something he had never known before: confidence. Each enemy neutralized by Shaw above, or the squad below, reinforced his courage. Keller moved behind him, covering the rear. Daniels swept through the buildings adjacent to the alley, ensuring no stragglers remained. The valley, once a trap, was now being cleared systematically, methodically, and every inch reclaimed was a victory against overwhelming odds. Shaw, now perched behind a partially collapsed wall high above, identified another enemy stronghold, a sniper nest hidden behind stacked crates on a ridge. Without hesitation, he moved to eliminate it. One precise shot, and the sniper was down. The impact of this invisible strike was immediate. The remaining enemy fighters in the valley panicked, unsure of where to defend or retreat. Keller used the opening, signaling his Marines to press further. Their movement became fluid, coordinated, and unstoppable. Each enemy neutralized became a symbol of survival, a reminder that courage and precision could overturn even the direst circumstances. The Marines pressed through the alley, engaging enemies in tight quarters. Keller barked orders with sharp efficiency, each word calculated to maximize impact and minimize casualties. Thompson's firing became more controlled, each shot confident and accurate. Daniels provided cover, while Ruiz's eyes never left the rooftops. Shaw's invisible hand guided them, unseen but omnipresent, every strike calculated, every target removed without error. The enemy, disoriented, began retreating toward the edges of the valley, their confidence shattered by the unexpected and unstoppable assault from both the ground and the unseen sky. Keller paused briefly, catching his breath, and scanned the horizon. Smoke and dust hung heavy in the air, illuminated by the rising sun. The valley had been transformed, no longer a trap, but a battleground where the Marines, guided by Shaw, were seizing the initiative. Keller's men, battered and exhausted, were alive and moving with purpose. The faint sound of distant gunfire reminded them that the enemy was still present, but their confidence was broken. The tide had shifted, and it was theirs to control. Shaw finally reappeared near Keller's position, approaching swiftly, rifle at the ready. His uniform was tattered, helmet cracked, yet his movements remained precise and deliberate. Keller's heart pounded as he realized that this man, presumed dead days ago, had single-handedly changed the dynamics of the battle. "Lieutenant Shaw," Keller said, voice tight with admiration and relief. "You've turned the tide." Shaw smirked, exhaustion evident but determination unbroken. "We're not done yet. Let's finish this." The Marines understood instantly. The fight was far from over, but now they were fighting on their terms. The squad advanced through the valley, clearing enemy strongholds one by one. The combination of Shaw's phantom-like assaults and the Marines' relentless advance created a synergy that the enemy could not anticipate or counter. Keller directed his men like a conductor, every movement synchronized, every shot precise, every step deliberate. Thompson, once terrified and trembling, now moved with a focus that matched the seasoned Marines beside him. The battle was no longer a desperate struggle for survival. It was a calculated reclaiming of the valley. As the morning sun broke over the mountains, Keller allowed himself a brief glance at the horizon. The enemy's resistance was faltering, their formation crumbling under relentless pressure from both ground and sky. Shaw's unseen hand had made this possible, but Keller knew the final victory required coordination, courage, and every ounce of skill his men possessed. "Hold the alley," he shouted. "No one gets through without a fight." The Marines tightened their formation, moving forward with deadly precision, eyes blazing with determination. The valley, once a trap, was becoming a testament to courage, skill, and brotherhood. The first rays of dawn cast a pale, trembling light over the valley, illuminating the devastation that had transformed the once peaceful village into a battlefield of smoke, fire, and rubble. Sergeant Keller crouched behind the shattered remains of what had been a marketplace, rifle steady in his hands, scanning the alleys and ridges for enemy movement. His men were battered, faces streaked with soot and grime, bodies aching from hours of relentless fighting. Yet their eyes shone with determination. They had survived the initial onslaught, and now, fueled by adrenaline and the ghostly intervention of Lieutenant Eric Shaw, they were ready to strike back. Corporal Ruiz adjusted his scope, tracking a group of insurgents attempting to regroup behind a crumbling wall. "Sarge, they're moving toward the east alley. Looks like they're trying to flank us," he whispered, voice taut with tension. Keller nodded, eyes narrowing. "Then we hit them first. Thompson, cover fire on the left. Daniels, with me flank from the right. Ruiz, stay high, overwatch. Keep your eyes sharp. Any movement is a threat." Each Marine moved with lethal precision, muscles coiled like springs, every breath measured, every step deliberate. They had one chance to reclaim the valley and turn the tide of the battle. Above the chaos, Shaw moved like a phantom, unseen yet devastatingly effective. He leaped across fractured rooftops, rifle poised, targeting enemy snipers and machine gun nests with ruthless efficiency. Every shot was calculated, every movement silent but deadly. Keller watched in awe as Shaw eliminated a sniper who had been pinning down Thompson, the bullet finding its mark with surgical precision. "He's everywhere at once," Ruiz muttered, shaking his head. Keller didn't answer. He could only focus on the unfolding battle. Shaw's intervention had shifted the dynamic entirely. The enemy, once confident, now faltered, unsure of where the next strike would come from. The Marines advanced through the narrow alleyways, using every scrap of cover to shield themselves from sporadic gunfire. Thompson, once pale and trembling, had grown into the role of a confident soldier. His rifle flashed as he suppressed enemy positions, moving in sync with Daniels and Keller. The valley, once a trap that had threatened to claim them all, was now a battlefield they could navigate with purpose. Each fallen enemy, each cleared building, each reclaimed inch of territory brought a surge of hope, a reminder that they were no longer prey but hunters. Shaw's assault from above intensified. He neutralized a machine gun nest that had been holding the Marines back for hours. The blast of his rifle and the sudden disappearance of enemy fire created an opening Keller immediately exploited. "Move! Push through the alley!" he shouted, voice sharp and commanding. The Marines surged forward, firing in controlled bursts, clearing corners and securing buildings. The enemy, disoriented and terrified, stumbled and retreated in small, chaotic groups. Keller's tactical mind worked rapidly, coordinating his squad's movements with precision, using Shaw's phantom strikes as both cover and psychological warfare. The central alley, once a death trap, became the focal point of their advance. Keller led the charge, signaling Thompson to cover the left flank, while he and Daniels moved to secure a critical building overlooking the street. Ruiz remained on the rooftops, rifles trained on distant shadows, eyes scanning for hidden threats. Every movement was precise, every shot deliberate. The enemy, unable to anticipate the coordinated assault from both ground and sky, fell into disarray. Panic spread through their ranks as Shaw struck again, eliminating isolated squads with deadly accuracy. The valley erupted in chaos. Explosions from detonated enemy traps shook the ground, dust and debris filling the Marines' lungs. Keller shouted orders above the din. "Secure the alley. Cover each other. Watch rooftops." Thompson fired with newfound confidence, suppressing enemy positions, while Daniels cleared adjacent buildings. Ruiz's careful aim picked off anyone attempting to regroup on the ridges. Shaw, now moving closer to Keller's position, advanced methodically, neutralizing a group of insurgents attempting a counterattack. The synergy between the ground forces and Shaw's unseen hand was unstoppable, turning the tide decisively. As they pressed forward, Keller noticed the enemy attempting to fortify a ridge overlooking the village. It was their last stronghold, and if not neutralized, the Marines would remain vulnerable. "We take that ridge," Keller said, voice low but firm. "Thompson, cover left. Daniels, right. Ruiz, provide overwatch. Let's clear them out before they regroup." Every Marine understood the stakes. Each knew that failure meant death, yet courage burned fiercely in their hearts. They advanced with the precision of a well-oiled machine, bullets cutting through the chaos, clearing buildings and reclaiming control inch by inch. Shaw leapt down from a high wall near the ridge, moving through the enemy lines like a shadow. His uniform was scorched, helmet cracked, but his movements were fluid, precise, and lethal. One enemy fell to his rifle. Another neutralized with hand-to-hand efficiency as he advanced with unstoppable momentum. Keller watched, a mixture of awe and relief washing over him. Shaw had changed the course of this battle, not merely surviving, but actively dismantling the enemy's ability to fight. His presence was as psychological as it was physical, and Keller relied on it fully. The ridge was finally within reach. Keller motioned for his men to advance in formation, weapons ready, every eye scanning for threats. Thompson's breathing was steady now, determination etched into his features. Daniels moved like a shadow beside him, clearing every corner and doorway, while Ruiz's overwatch suppressed enemy movement from above. The Marines' coordinated assault, combined with Shaw's phantom-like strikes, had fractured the enemy's morale. What had been a seemingly insurmountable force was now a group of panicked, scattered fighters, unsure of where to go or how to regroup. Shaw moved to a higher vantage point on the ridge, his rifle aimed carefully at enemy combatants attempting to escape. His precision was flawless, eliminating threats with minimal risk to the Marines below. Keller seized the opportunity. "Push, take the ridge." No hesitation. He shouted. The squad surged forward, every movement synchronized, every shot calculated. The enemy scrambled, resistance weakening as they realized the tide had irrevocably turned. Smoke and dust hung heavy, obscuring vision, but Keller's Marines pressed relentlessly, reclaiming territory that had been lost only hours before. In the chaos, Keller saw Thompson neutralize a hidden sniper, a testament to his growth and newfound courage. Daniels cleared a building full of retreating enemy combatants, while Ruiz provided critical cover from the rooftops. Keller's leadership had maintained cohesion, but it was Shaw's intervention that had made the impossible possible. The lieutenant moved with unwavering determination, eliminating key threats and striking fear into the enemy. Together, they were unstoppable, a combination of precision, courage, and skill that no opposing force could withstand. Finally, the ridge was secured. Keller's squad regrouped, breathing heavily but alive, eyes scanning for any remaining threats. Shaw descended from his vantage point, joining them on the ground, still alert and ready. Keller clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Lieutenant, you've done the impossible." Shaw shook his head, exhaustion evident but determination intact. "We're not done yet," he replied. "The valley isn't secure until every last threat is neutralized." Keller nodded. The fight was nearly over, but vigilance remained paramount. Survival depended on every decision, every movement, and every ounce of courage left in them. The enemy, scattered and demoralized, attempted one last desperate counterattack. Keller's squad, bolstered by Shaw's guidance, met them head-on. Each shot was precise, each movement deliberate. Explosions erupted sporadically as the enemy's equipment and morale crumbled. Keller coordinated his men with sharp authority, ensuring every threat was neutralized efficiently. Shaw's presence on the ridge allowed them to anticipate attacks before they occurred, striking fear and confusion into anyone attempting to regroup. The final counterattack was brutal but calculated, ensuring the Marines maintained control while minimizing casualties. By the time the sun had fully risen over the mountains, the valley was largely secure. Keller's squad, bloodied and exhausted, stood among the rubble, breathing heavily, surveying the remnants of the battle. The enemy had been fractured, scattered, and finally broken. Shaw, beside Keller, allowed himself a brief smile, but his eyes remained vigilant, aware that danger could still linger. Keller looked at his men, their faces grim but alive. "We did it," he muttered, a mixture of relief and pride washing over him. Survival, against all odds, had been achieved. The sun climbed higher, burning away the shadows of the night, but revealing the full scale of the devastation. The village lay in ruins walls, reduced to rubble, smoke curling from burned-out homes, the acrid scent of gunpowder and blood thick in the air. Sergeant Keller crouched behind the shattered remnants of what had been a schoolhouse, surveying the valley with a sharp, calculating gaze. His men, battered and exhausted, were alive but tense, eyes scanning every shadow, every corner, every roof. The enemy was fragmented, but pockets of resistance remained, desperate and dangerous. The battle was not yet over. Corporal Ruiz kept his scope trained on a ridge where a group of insurgents had holed up, attempting to regroup for one final assault. "Sarge, they're holding a strong position near the northern ridge," he whispered. Keller's jaw tightened. "Then that's where we hit next. Thompson, suppress left flank. Daniels, with me flanked from the right. Ruiz, cover us from above. We finish this now." The squad moved like a shadow, each step deliberate, every movement calculated to minimize exposure and maximize effectiveness. The stakes were clear: Any misstep could be fatal. Shaw, perched atop the highest ridge they had secured, scanned the battlefield with unerring precision. His rifle rested against his shoulder, eyes sharp behind his cracked visor. "I see them," he muttered into his cums. "3 clusters, armed and desperate. They won't hold long, but they're dangerous." Keller responded immediately. "Copy that. Cover fire on my mark, then Daniels and I move in." Shaw's eyes flicked over the positions, assessing angles, line of sight, and potential cover. Every move he made was tactical, every shot precise. His presence was now more than combat support. It was command from above, an invisible force shaping the battlefield. The Marines advanced cautiously through the valley, moving between shattered buildings and debris, rifles ready, senses heightened. Thompson, once trembling with fear, now fired with controlled precision, suppressing enemy positions as Daniels and Keller moved forward. Ruiz's overwatch provided critical cover, eliminating anyone attempting to flee or regroup on the ridges. The enemy, already fractured by Shaw's relentless assaults, hesitated, unsure of where to take cover, uncertain of where the next strike would come from. The psychological advantage, once almost intangible, had become real. The Marines were no longer prey, they were hunters. Keller signaled for a coordinated push toward the northern ridge. "We advance in 3 groups," he commanded, voice calm but authoritative. "Thompson and I take the center. Daniels and Ruiz cover the flanks. Shaw, neutralize any threats above." The squad moved like a single organism, synchronized in movement and fire. Explosions rocked the valley as remaining enemy combatants detonated makeshift traps or tried to halt their advance. Dust and debris clouded the air, yet Keller's men pressed forward with relentless precision. Every shot counted, every step was survival. Shaw's presence from the ridge became increasingly lethal. He moved silently, taking down isolated insurgents with methodical efficiency. Each shot struck with deadly accuracy, eliminating key positions and preventing enemy reinforcement. Keller's squad used the openings he created to advance steadily, clearing buildings and neutralizing threats systematically. Thompson's confidence soared, muscles taut but controlled as he fired, covering Keller's movements. Ruiz's scope found targets from above, thinning enemy numbers and creating panic in the remaining insurgents. Together, the ground assault and aerial precision dismantled the enemy's last line of resistance. Suddenly, a series of mortar rounds impacted the northern ridge, sending dirt, rock, and debris flying. Keller instinctively pressed Thompson behind a wall, shouting, "Down! Cover!" The explosions rocked the valley, dust blinding, but Shaw reacted immediately. Moving with uncanny speed, he neutralized the team responsible for firing the mortar, eliminating the threat before they could reload. Keller's jaw tightened, impressed by the lieutenant's precision and awareness. The enemy, shocked and demoralized, scrambled for cover, leaving positions undefended. Keller seized the opportunity. "Move, secure the ridge." The Marines surged forward, clearing the northern ridge, building by building. Daniels moved to the right, Thompson on the left, while Keller covered the center, every corner checked meticulously. Ruiz provided sniper support from behind, picking off anyone attempting to flee or reinforce. The enemy's morale was collapsing. Panic spread like wildfire. The combination of ground pressure and Shaw's unseen influence from above had shattered their cohesion. Keller could feel the shift. A tide that had once threatened to drown them now carried them forward, unstoppable and resolute. As they reached the ridge's summit, Keller noticed the remaining insurgents attempting to flee down a narrow path toward the valley's edge. "Stop them," he shouted, signaling Thompson to intercept. Thompson moved with precision, firing controlled bursts, cutting off any escape. Daniels flanked from the right, closing the circle. Shaw from above kept the retreating forces pinned, his presence both lethal and psychological. The final enemy units, realizing their survival was impossible, either surrendered or were neutralized with ruthless efficiency. The northern ridge, once a fortress of enemy power, was now firmly in Marine hands. Keller paused briefly, surveying the battlefield from the ridge. Smoke rose from scattered fires, and the groans of the wounded mingled with the morning wind. His squad, bloodied but alive, regrouped behind cover. "Good work," he muttered, voice low but firm. "Stay sharp." They might have hidden cells, traps, or snipers. Shaw descended from his position, landing silently behind Keller, rifle at the ready. "They're scattered," he said, exhaustion evident, but determination intact. "Mostly isolated. The fight is nearly over." Keller nodded, gratitude and respect evident in his gaze. The lieutenant had not only survived, but had ensured their survival, and now he guided them through the final phase of the battle. The Marines methodically cleared the last pockets of resistance in the valley. Each building, alleyway, and crumbled structure was checked for hidden threats. Keller coordinated movements, signaling his squad with crisp, precise commands. Thompson's hands, once shaky, moved with confidence. Daniels executed tactical maneuvers with deadly efficiency. Ruiz continued his overwatch from elevated positions. Shaw, now visible and moving among them, acted as both scout and strike force, neutralizing threats before they could endanger the squad. The valley, once a death trap, was now being meticulously secured. Above, distant engine noises announced the arrival of reinforcements and air support. Helicopters appeared on the horizon, their rotors slicing through the dawn sky, dropping additional Marines and providing cover fire for consolidation. Keller allowed himself a rare moment of relief, realizing that extraction and reinforcements had finally arrived. Shaw nodded toward the incoming support, eyes scanning for remaining threats. "We've done most of the work," he muttered. "But we can't relax yet." Keller agreed. Vigilance was still paramount until the area was completely secure. The squad moved systematically, clearing hidden traps and fortifications left by retreating enemy forces. Keller's leadership was precise, every decision measured, every order calculated. Thompson and Daniels covered flanks, Ruiz's sniper support neutralized distant threats, and Shaw acted as both guide and executor of final strikes. Explosions and gunfire echoed intermittently, but the tide of battle had shifted irreversibly. The enemy, scattered and demoralized, offered little organized resistance. Every step forward was reclaiming control, solidifying the Marines' dominance in the valley. By mid-morning, the valley was secure. Keller's squad, bloodied, exhausted, and breathing heavily, stood atop the northern ridge, surveying the wreckage below. Shaw, beside him, allowed himself a brief smile, but remained alert, knowing that vigilance was the final safeguard. Keller clapped him on the shoulder. "Lieutenant, I don't know how to thank you," he said, voice tight with emotion. Shaw shook his head. "You didn't need me. You held together. I just helped even the odds." Keller nodded, respect and gratitude mingling with relief. Together, they had survived what had seemed impossible. The incoming reinforcements established secure positions, evacuating the wounded and securing the perimeter. Keller's squad reported in, confirming the valley was now under control. Shaw moved with them, assisting in triage, marking enemy positions, and ensuring no threat remained. The once trapped Marines now stood victorious, exhausted but alive, their bond strengthened by fire and battle. Keller took a deep breath, surveying the valley. The enemy had been broken, the impossible survived, and a new sense of hope permeated the squad. Against all odds, they had turned the tide. The valley, once a trap that had threatened to claim every Marine present, was now eerily quiet. Smoke still lingered over shattered buildings and scorched earth, curling into the pale morning light. The acrid smell of gunpowder and blood hung thick in the air, a harsh reminder of the chaos that had raged through the night. Sergeant Keller stood atop the northern ridge, surveying the battlefield, rifle at his side, muscles tense even though the fighting had ceased. Every ruined building, every cratered street, every scorched vehicle told a story of survival, sacrifice, and sheer willpower. Keller's squad moved methodically below him, regrouping, attending to the wounded, and assessing the scope of destruction. Thompson and Daniels checked their ammunition and bandaged minor injuries, while Ruiz kept his sniper scope trained on the ridges, ensuring no hidden threats remained. Keller's eyes scanned every shadow, every corner, expecting ambushes that would never come. The enemy had been decisively broken, their will shattered. Yet Keller did not allow himself to relax fully. In battle, vigilance was the difference between life and death, even now. Shaw approached from the ridge, his uniform battered and torn, helmet cracked, but eyes alive with sharp intensity. Keller watched him move, noting the quiet authority he carried despite exhaustion. The lieutenant's presence had changed everything without him. The Marines might not have survived. Keller allowed himself a rare moment of gratitude. "Lieutenant Shaw," he said, voice low but carrying over the valley, "I can't begin to express how grateful we all are. You changed the outcome of this fight." Shaw shook his head slightly, almost dismissively. "You held together when it mattered," he replied. "I just helped even the odds." The Marines gathered around, forming a loose circle amid the ruins. Thompson, still pale but standing taller than he had all night, looked at Shaw with a mixture of awe and relief. I can't believe you made it," he stammered. "Everyone thought you were gone." Shaw allowed a brief, tired smile. "Fate isn't done with me yet," he said. His voice carried calm reassurance, the kind that steadied nerves frayed by relentless combat. Keller nodded silently, understanding fully. Shaw had become more than a pilot or a soldier. He was the catalyst that had turned hopelessness into survival, chaos into order, and fear into courage. Corporal Ruiz spoke next, voice steady but heavy with emotion. "Sir, Lieutenant, you're unreal. You saved us all." Shaw's expression softened for the first time, revealing the weight of the battle etched into his features. "I just did my job," he replied quietly, though his tone carried an unspoken acknowledgment of the risk he had taken. Keller stepped forward, placing a firm hand on Shaw's shoulder. "No, this was more than duty. You jumped into the fire literally, and gave us a chance we didn't have. That's heroism." Shaw nodded, quietly accepting the recognition. Keller turned his attention to his squad. "Men," he said, voice strong, "look around. We survived. Not just because we fought hard, but because we didn't give up. We had courage when we had nothing to cling to, and we had help when hope seemed lost." The Marines exchanged glances, each silently acknowledging the truth of his words. Thompson clenched his jaw, still catching his breath, while Daniels and Ruiz nodded in solemn agreement. The bond forged in battle was unspoken but unmistakable, a brotherhood born of fire, sweat, and survival. Keller walked among his men, checking wounds, offering encouragement, and ensuring everyone was accounted for. The valley had taken a toll physically, mentally, and emotionally, but the squad had endured. The adrenaline that had kept them alive was now fading, leaving a quiet exhaustion that pressed on their shoulders. Yet the fire of determination remained, tempered by gratitude and relief. They had survived the impossible. They had turned a death trap into a battlefield of victory. Shaw moved to the edge of the ridge, surveying the valley with the meticulous attention of a man who had seen both life and death in its rawest form. He spotted signs of lingering enemy forces scattered, disorganized, weak but none capable of mounting a serious counterattack. "They're finished," he said quietly to Keller. "All that's left is cleanup and consolidation. The rest is up to you." Keller nodded, appreciating Shaw's pragmatism. The lieutenant had not only fought alongside them, but also ensured the Marines were capable of finishing the operation, taking responsibility for both survival and strategic oversight. The squad began to consolidate positions, evacuating the wounded and securing critical points in the valley. Keller coordinated with incoming reinforcements, sharing intelligence and marking locations for extraction. Helicopters hovered overhead, their rotors kicking up dust and debris, lifting the injured to safety. Thompson assisted in helping wounded comrades into the choppers, muscles trembling with fatigue, yet resolute. Daniels and Ruiz moved methodically, clearing any lingering hazards and ensuring no enemy could regroup. The chaos of battle had passed, but the work of survival and protection continued. Keller allowed himself a brief moment to reflect. The events of the night replayed vividly in his mind. The initial ambush, the desperation, the fear, and then the sudden appearance of Shaw from the sky, a force both miraculous and lethal. He thought of every Marine who had fought, every risk taken, every life endangered. Survival had demanded courage, strategy, and unyielding determination. And above all, it had required trust in each other, in the men beside them, and in the mysterious presence that had appeared when all hope seemed lost. Shaw approached Keller once more, hands resting on the rifle slung across his back. "The valley is secure," he said. "You led well. Your men followed. That's what won this fight, not just me." Keller nodded, deeply aware of the truth in his words. "We survived because we trusted each other, and because you showed up when the odds were against us. We owe you more than we can say." Shaw allowed a faint smile, gaze sweeping the valley once more. "Just make sure the story gets told right. Not just about me, but about everyone who stood here and refused to give up." The Marines began gathering their gear, preparing to move with the reinforcements and return to base. Thompson, once terrified and shaking, now stood taller, a quiet pride etched into his expression. Daniels and Ruiz exchanged weary but triumphant nods. Keller surveyed his men, his heart swelling with respect and gratitude. They had endured the impossible and emerged alive. The valley had taken a toll, but it had also forged an unbreakable bond, strengthened by fire and battle. Shaw had been the spark, but the Marines had been the flame that refused to die. As the squad began moving toward the extraction point, Keller glanced one last time at the valley. The sun illuminated the destruction, the ruins, and the courage etched into every stone and every footprint. He thought of the men who had fought, the enemy who had threatened them, and the miraculous arrival of a pilot who had fallen from the sky. The valley had been transformed, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. Survival, courage, and brotherhood had claimed it. Shaw walked alongside Keller as the helicopters landed and the Marines prepared to board. "You ready for some rest?" Keller asked, voice dry but laced with humor. Shaw shook his head faintly, exhaustion clear in his posture. "I'll sleep when this valley is fully secure," he replied. Keller nodded, understanding the unspoken truth. Warriors never truly rest until the battlefield is no longer a threat. And tonight, against impossible odds, they had survived, they had prevailed, and they had done it together. The helicopters lifted off, carrying the squad and reinforcements to safety. Below, the valley remained a silent testament to courage, strategy, and survival. Keller watched as the wreckage receded beneath the rising sun, each crumbled building and scorched wall, a symbol of the battle endured and the lives preserved. Shaw stood beside him, helmet under his arm, eyes scanning for any final threats. Both men understood the gravity of what had happened and the miraculous combination of courage, skill, and timing that had saved lives that night. For the Marines, the story would live on. For Keller, the bond forged with his men and with Shaw would remain unbroken. For Shaw, the night would remain a testament to resilience and determination, the proof that one man could alter the course of a battle when fate seemed lost. And for the valley itself, the scars of destruction would remain, but so would the story of survival, heroism, and brotherhood that had unfolded under the harsh light of fire and chaos. The helicopters lifted off, their rotors tearing through the early morning stillness, stirring dust and debris into whirling clouds over the ravaged valley. Sergeant Keller and his squad sat silently, gripping their weapons, their eyes fixed on the scene below. The valley, once a death trap filled with the roar of enemy fire, now lay quiet, scarred but conquered. Smoke curled lazily from shattered buildings, and the remnants of barricades and rubble bore witness to the chaos and courage that had transpired through the night. Each cratered street, each fallen wall, each scarred building told a story of survival against impossible odds. Keller exhaled slowly, finally allowing himself a brief respite. His men beside him were silent too, minds processing the adrenaline, fear, and exhaustion that had defined the night. Thompson, still pale but steadier now, ran a hand along his rifle, jaw tight. "I can't believe we made it," he muttered. Daniels gave a tired nod. "We fought. We survived. That's enough for now." Ruiz remained quiet, eyes scanning the horizon, a habit ingrained by vigilance. Keller glanced at him with a faint, knowing smile. No Marine who had endured the night could ever fully relax, but each knew that survival was victory enough. Shaw stood at the edge of the helicopter's landing zone, helmet off, face smeared with soot and sweat, uniform torn but resolute. Keller walked beside him, speaking softly so the squad wouldn't overhear. "Lieutenant, you did more than anyone could have imagined. I don't know how to thank you." Shaw shook his head, eyes scanning the valley below. "You didn't need me," he said quietly. "You led your men, held them together, and ensured survival. I just made it possible to tip the scales. The rest was on you." Keller felt a deep respect swell within him. Shaw had saved lives, but he had also honored the courage of every Marine present. The squad moved to board the helicopters, each step careful, as dust and debris swirled around them. Keller kept a protective eye on his men, ensuring no last-minute threat lingered. Thompson climbed aboard first, followed by Daniels, then Ruiz. Keller hesitated for a moment, glancing at the valley one last time. The battlefield had been conquered, yet its scars would remain, not just on the earth, but etched into their memories. Survival had come at a cost, yet the bond forged in the fires of combat had proven unbreakable. Shaw approached Keller, helmet slung under one arm. "This isn't the end," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "The enemy may return elsewhere, but what happened here tonight matters. It proves what courage, coordination, and determination can achieve, even against overwhelming odds." Keller nodded solemnly, understanding the weight of Shaw's words. The valley had been more than a battlefield. It had been a crucible that tested every Marine's skill, courage, and resilience. And against all odds, they had survived. They had prevailed. The helicopter's engines roared as they lifted into the sky, carrying the Marines away from the valley. Keller watched the landscape fall away beneath him, smoke and rubble marking the scenes of their battle. The men around him, exhausted and quiet, shared a silent acknowledgement of what they had endured. Thompson's grip on his rifle relaxed slightly, his eyes taking in the view below with a mixture of awe and relief. Daniels exhaled a long, shuddering breath, letting the tension drain from his muscles. Ruiz scanned the horizon one last time, eyes sharp but gradually softening. Survival had demanded everything, and now they could begin to process it. Shaw remained at Keller's side, silent eyes focused on the horizon. "You did well," Keller said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "All of you did. I couldn't have asked for better men." Shaw allowed a faint smile, exhaustion evident, but tempered by quiet pride. "You didn't just survive, you led. That's what counts. That's what makes a difference." Keller nodded, understanding the rare honor in those words. Leadership was not about glory. It was about ensuring survival, inspiring courage, and guiding others through chaos. Tonight, every Marine had demonstrated it in spades. The helicopters carried them back toward base, the valley receding below like a dark memory slowly fading in the morning light. Keller's mind replayed the night, the ambush, the cornered Marines, the relentless assault, and the miraculous intervention of Shaw. He thought of every bullet fired, every building cleared, every life saved. Each memory carried weight, a mixture of trauma, relief, and pride. Yet beneath it all was gratitude, a recognition that survival had been a team effort, with courage and skill intertwined in ways few could comprehend. As they approached the base, Keller surveyed his squad. Thompson's eyes had regained focus, determination replacing fear. Daniels moved with quiet efficiency, muscles no longer trembling with adrenaline, but relaxed and ready. Ruiz's vigilance remained, but his posture had eased, a subtle acknowledgement of the battle survived. Keller felt the weight of leadership, knowing that the night had tested him beyond anything he had imagined. And yet, he also felt pride for his men, for their courage, and for the unexpected hero who had fallen from the sky to tip the balance in their favor. The helicopters touched down, rotor wash kicking up dust and debris, and the squad disembarked carefully. Keller led them through the base, ensuring wounded were taken to medical attention and positions were secured. Shaw walked beside him, quiet but watchful. The commander of the base approached, eyes wide as he surveyed the squad. "Sergeant Keller, Lieutenant Shaw. Reports say the valley is secure." "How?" Keller's jaw tightened. "It wasn't just me," he said, glancing at Shaw and then at his squad. "Every Marine fought, every movement mattered, and one man from above gave us a chance we wouldn't have had otherwise." The commander nodded, a mixture of awe and disbelief in his expression. "Then it's true. They survived. Against impossible odds." Keller allowed himself a faint smile, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "They did more than survive," he replied. "They fought, they held together, and they reclaimed the valley. Every man here deserves recognition, and the one who fell from the sky deserves more than we can say." Shaw remained silent, his gaze distant but steady. He had saved lives, but the quiet acknowledgement from Keller and the squad was enough. Later, in the quiet of the debriefing room, Keller reflected on the events of the night. Reports were filed, enemy casualties noted, and reinforcements dispatched to secure the area further. Yet beyond the paperwork, beyond the tactical analysis, Keller understood the deeper truth. Courage, teamwork, and resilience had prevailed against impossible odds. Thompson, once terrified, now recounted moments of clarity and bravery. Daniels and Ruiz added their perspectives, highlighting the coordination and determination that had saved them. And Shaw, quiet as always, offered only tactical observations, deflecting praise while silently acknowledging the gratitude of every life he had helped save. The valley would remain scarred, a lasting testament to the battle fought and won. But for Keller and his men, the experience had forged something indelible, a bond of trust, courage, and brotherhood that would endure beyond the battlefield. Shaw had intervened when hope seemed lost, but it was the Marines' determination, skill, and courage that had made survival possible. Together, they had turned desperation into victory, chaos into strategy, and fear into a testament to human resilience. As the sun set over the base, casting long shadows across the land. Keller looked at Shaw one last time. "Thank you," he said simply. Shaw nodded, his expression calm, yet carrying the weight of what had transpired. "We all did this together," he replied. Keller understood fully. The heroism was shared, the survival collective, the victory undeniable. The night had tested every limit, pushed every boundary, and yet, against impossible odds, they had survived, prevailed, and emerged stronger. The Marines settled for the night, exhaustion finally giving way to sleep, dreams haunted by memories, yet tempered by relief. Keller remained awake a little longer, gazing at the stars above, thinking of the valley, the chaos, the courage, and the miraculous intervention that had saved them. Shaw had fallen from the sky when needed most, but it was their courage, their trust, and their brotherhood that had allowed them to survive. And as the night stretched on, Keller knew that this story, the story of survival, heroism, and the bonds forged in fire, would endure far beyond the valley, far beyond the battlefield. The helicopter that had carried them from the valley now rested silently on the tarmac, engines cooling, rotors still. Keller and Shaw stood side by side, surveying the quiet aftermath, the calm that followed chaos. The battle had ended, but the legacy remained. The Marines had survived against impossible odds, guided by skill, courage, and one unseen hero who had dropped from the sky. And in the stillness of the night, under the vast expanse of stars, the echoes of bravery, brotherhood, and survival lingered, an enduring testament to the unbreakable spirit of those who had fought and lived.